So, welcome back to the Life in a D podcast, you guys. I'm your host, Tila, and you know what we do here. We talk about real stories with real people and entrepreneurs, creatives, people who are doing things here in the DFW area. And this podcast today, I'm super excited about because this one is just really close to my heart. We are talking about careers and purpose, and we are talking about what we learn over the years in these careers. So, I have Alice on the podcast. Alice, thank you so much for agreeing to do the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking. This is going to be a lot of fun, I think.
Yes, I think so too. I'm so excited. So I don't know where to even start because I'm like, you have so much stuff. But I think we started radio. Is it okay?
Yeah. Radio
Okay.
is where I've always been, or that I say that was where the majority of my career was. I went to school, got my degree at Stephen F. Austin in East Texas in radio, TV, and film in the communications area. And so when I was in school, I always thought I wanted to be in TV, but I had a professor. He was all about radio. And he really changed my mind because his thing was in television, you have the pictures and the video to tell the story. But in radio, you have to learn to be a good writer because you're telling the story in words and you have to put that picture in the listener's mind. And that really stuck with me because that led me to thinking about the fact that creative writing is about being able to tell a good story. And so I was in radio for over 30 years in all. I worked in radio while I was in college, and then I got my first job at an all new station, my first big job in Dallas at KRLD, which is the 24/7 news station. I was there for 25 years. And, when you're there, and I made my way from traffic reporter to morning news anchor, when you're in that morning news anchor seat, you think you're queen of the world. You're going to be there forever.
Mhm.
And that wasn't the case. And we can either talk about that whole ordeal, or if you want me to kind of go through the different careers I've had, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, one of the first things that I want to touch on with that is let's talk about career and staying in the same place for so long because a lot of people, especially today, are bouncing from job to job. So you want to speak a little bit to that real quick about like how are
Yeah.
you able to stay there so long?
A big part of that, I think, is being not so much a yes person, but being flexible. Whatever the changes are, because I was there at KRLD from 1991 through 2015. You have to think about the fact that when I started there, we were using typewriters. I mean, I
Oh
think
my.
that's even hard for somebody your age to imagine. We were using typewriters. Computers were these big ass clunky things, and they were just coming in like 2 or 3 years after I started my job there. So we went from typewriters to technology today, and just imagine those technological changes that if you can't keep up with technology, you weren't sticking around. And there were a lot of people who didn't make it because they just couldn't adapt and they weren't willing to learn it was really a big part of it. But being a team player was also, I think, another big part of it. So in the jobs that we think about, in the careers we think about pursuing, people think it's about the skills, and really skills can be taught. So you have to be flexible. You have to be positive, I think, be able to work well with people. And those things are what helped me, throughout my career at CBS Radio. Not to mention, some people in the radio business, you either have it or you don't with that radio voice, so to speak. And I knew that I had that going for me. So that's kind of what helped with the longevity. But there came the point at CBS after 25 years where, as part of the morning show, I was being paid more than, 90% of the people in the newsroom. So my contract came up. They decided not to renew it. And granted, this was on the heels of having interviewed President Obama in the White House. Like 2 months later, they dropped me. And that was shell shock. Although I had already been sending out my resume because my time there it wasn't fun anymore. And so I knew I wanted to switch gears. So I had to recreate myself, reinvent myself, and focus on the things that I was good at from CBS and try to transition into PR. And so I just decided I'm going to get into marketing or PR. And again, I think what's important for listeners and viewers to remember is that don't think that you're pigeonholed into one industry. Take your skills and figure out which one of those skills are different than that normal person and their resume, and focus on what you can add to a job. The fact that I was in communications, I also had a lot of networking resources in the
Mhm.
industry, and that helped a lot. But so, yeah, I went from radio to marketing at Dallas College, spent 6 years there. And then I got in at TxDOT. You and I worked together at TxDOT as a public information officer. From there, City of Dallas for a short stint. And now I'm teaching at an elementary school, English second language. And I think one of the big takeaways I would want anybody to know is that don't pigeonhole yourself. Focus on your strengths and take them from one job to another. Because when you're writing that resume and filling out an application, now it's all about algorithms. And sure, you have to hit certain buzzwords, but remember that your skills are transferable in so many more ways than you even give yourself credit for. So that's a very important lesson.
Yeah. That's certainly true. That's certainly true. And I think because I know like some of us, we kind of have this like once we go to school for this thing, we think we need to use these degrees, right? We didn't pay this money for them. And so I think and so I don't know if like I study journalism, so I feel like I need to be a journalist, I have to stick in that. Like so I think like you say, kind of the mindset thing is something that sometimes we need to work on, right? Like just because I was a news lady at one point doesn't mean that that's my whole life.
No, and you've learned that already. You went
Hmm.
from being in the news to transitioning into public relations and as a spokesperson. There are so many industries that need the skills that you have, whether you were in news or whatever field you were in. There are other industries that need your skills. More importantly, they need your personality and they need your go get them, attitude. And they need those, what I call soft skills that some people
Yeah.
don't focus on the soft skills. I'm all about the soft skills. And that's what gotten me from job to job. I've loved every position I've had. I've enjoyed them. Now I've had some bosses that were a little challenging, but that's a part of the deal. You learn to deal with and work with that person who's your supervisor. In many cases, you work with them and think you're not going to be in that position long because you just know, right? But
Yeah.
it's a part of that transitioning your skills and don't think that you can only do one thing. That's really important. Another thing, Tila, is to prove your value and your worth, not just to your employer, but to yourself. You really
Hmm.
have to believe that you can do something outside of your comfort zone. A lot of companies are looking for people who think outside the box. So when you are looking at an application and you think, I don't have that skill, I can't do that. They want you because they want someone who hasn't worked in the industry forever and who, has the set answers. They want you to say, what if you tried this? So these companies want your skills, but they don't necessarily want that you've been in that position before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And also what you're saying too kind of relates to, especially when you talk about the changing technology. We are in that season right now where now our companies are starting to talk a little bit more about AI. And I think it's funny, especially, for ours, is that initially everybody was kind of more so worried about it. Oh my gosh, don't touch that. Now it seems as if they're starting to embrace it. So being me, being more of an early adapter of that, I feel like, I already know how to do that.
And that is
Welcome aboard.
Man, that is such an important skill because as I start learning AI, you kind of question, and definitely it can help you. AI can be an aid, but you have to be so careful, especially like in journalism and writing, you really have to make sure that it's factual first and
Hmm.
foremost, before you put it out there, and that it reads as though you're writing it. So in other words, you can take what AI says as a guide, but then, incorporate it into your own words so that it makes sense to your reader or viewer or whatever industry you're in. Make sure that it's not just you're not focusing or depending on AI, but I think it can be a very useful tool.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. I think so as well. How about tips on? Because another thing I think that you specialize in is networking and building the relationships. You are so amazing at that. Some tips for our listeners who might be a little bit more shy. I've also had some other friends too when in networking situations where I was feeling kind of shy, they would introduce me to the next person and stuff like that. They would be maybe a connector person for me. So, what kind of tips do you have for people who are a little bit shy about that?
Any job you've worked, you have connections. And whether you're outgoing or
Mm,
not, you have connections. And like you're saying, if you and I, let's say, are at a function at TxDOT and you're kind of newer to the company, and you're like, I don't know these people.
yeah.
It's a matter of saying, hey, can I introduce you to Tila? She's new on our team. Connections is just the gateway. And then, you kind of, as the other person, you have to pick it up from there to work at it to make that connection. But because I was in radio and then I was at Dallas College and TxDOT and City of Dallas, I have a lot of circles. And it sometimes, Tila, it takes introducing that one person to another person to connect them or for you yourself to get a job. I had a news director from years past who was working for the city of Dallas. And he's like, oh my gosh, we're looking for someone. And so that past connection, and because I stayed connected to that news director, led me to a role at City of Dallas. So the other important half of networking is maintaining those connections with people. I haven't seen this person in like 20 years, but they knew that I was still in the business in a roundabout way. And so they reached out. But most importantly, don't be shy when you're at a function. Go to functions. When you have the opportunity at your job to go to a networking thing, happy hour, a meeting, always, always when you can try to go to those because that's where you meet people. That's how you network.
Hmm.
These extracurricular events that you might not normally do. And I'm going to tell the introvert, go because there could be some other introverts there and you just tack onto them and start talking to them. You don't have to be an extrovert to attend extra outside of the office hours functions, to make extra connections. But networking is so important.
Yeah. What about on like keeping
You're
those connections?
better at it too. You're really getting very, very good at that. You're stretching your boundaries, right?
Yes, yes, definitely, always, yes. And that's one of the things I think I did early on. I used to be a shy kid, like I was not this extrovert at all. And it wasn't until I started doing some brand ambassador work where I was forced to go set up my little table and talk to strangers, where I feel like I got a little bit more adjusted to it and was able to kind of navigate that situation. But I used to live me of like 20 years ago. I would never talk to all these strangers and do all this stuff, but yeah, yeah, and I found, like, the reward of that to be amazing. I've made some amazing connections, and so, yeah, I totally agree. One thing I feel like I still could probably work on, though, is, kinda keeping in touch with those connections from some of those networking events. I might meet them, and then, like you said, I don't talk to them for a while, then maybe be a random email like, "Hey, how you doing?" So I don't know, some way of kind of, keeping those connections fresh and making sure they don't come off, like, shallow?
Well, but the thing to keep in mind, you do know those people. So don't be afraid to like what I've done a lot through my careers is we need a speaker for this. I wish we knew someone who could. And I'm like, gosh, I know someone, who works at so and so. Let me reach out. And I swear to you, 4 out of 5 times the people are like, hey, and they agree to do it. So an easy way to keep those connections is if your company and whatever role you're at, or if you have an extra job and you need someone to help you out to commit to doing a free speech to a group, reach out to those connections because that not only keeps you connected to them, if in the future they need you or you need another job, you maintain that. So be sure to try what you can do to maintain those connections, whether it's just a quick hi on a text or a chat or an email. But if you need someone that they might not be able to perform that task, but they might know someone. That's the whole networking connection thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that is a good tip to keep on hand for sure. And I think another thing that like especially in this day and age, it is becoming more challenging to get jobs. Like people are finding they are applying for 6 months to a year before they find their next opportunity. So maybe I don't know if we can offer any kind of advice or tips to people who are waiting, hoping.
I have to get them because my husband has a daughter who's been looking for a job for at least 6 to 8 months, and she's got 3 degrees, and can't. But here's the thing: she's approaching 30, and she is of the generation that she pretty much has her mindset. I want to do this, I want to do this, and I want to do this. I want to do social media. I want to do this. It's impressing upon younger people, take a job, get a job. If you're substituting, go substitute. Take any
Hmm.
job that offers insurance. That's kind of important. And then once you get into that arena, you make connections and then you can get a full time as a teacher. Or then you can, someone might say, oh my gosh, my dad needs a social media marketer in his company. You have to have a job to get a better job. So my advice is don't be choosy, especially in these economic times. Do not be choosy. Let your pride, set it aside. I'm only going to work these hours and this and that. You can't do that. And it's hard to understand, these generations or to impress upon them that the salary really, okay, yeah, it matters. But if you're working, your parents might be more willing to help you if you have a job, right?
Yeah.
So take the job that is offered to you. And then from that, you start springing. You'd be amazed how when you're working, that's when all the other opportunities happen. That happens 9 out of 10 times. You take a
Mhm.
job and all of a sudden you're more marketable because the longer you sit out, the harder it's gonna be, and I'm talking go to Walmart, go to, Ecker Drugs, oh my god, they're not even around anymore. Go to anywhere and get a job, and from that job, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have another opportunity presented to you. So
Definitely. Another thing we gotta remember, and I think this is what I'm kinda realizing too, is that sometimes if it could just be the 9 to 5 is paying the bills, and I am doing the things that I'm passionate about on the side. Sometimes it could be that too. Like these 8 hours is not my entire life, right? I do these 8 hours and I go do what my passions are, or spend time with the people I wanna spend time with, and sometimes it could just be that too, I think, and that's okay.
and that you know what? That's what the one thing I love the goal because when I see your stuff on Instagram and I see, that you're out and about and you're having fun and you're living life. And so, yeah, you got 9 to 5. Okay. But then you're going that extra mile. And by doing this podcast, by doing your Instagram stuff, you're expanding your audiences, but you're also having fun. I can just tell you're going to restaurants and all that, and you're living life. And that's really what it's all about too. Aside from we have to work, we have to pay the bills,
Yes.
have fun, you know?
Yes. That's funny you say that too, because I did post one fair. I think one of the pictures of the fair, and somebody commented and was like, "Oh my gosh, you just look so content." And I was like, "Oh, thank you."
But you do it to the fullest, and everybody should do that. Everybody should aspire to live your life. Don't just sit, and dwell or sulk. Just get out there. Have fun. We're
Yeah. Yeah.
YOLO. My gosh, we only live once, and you gotta take advantage while you can.
Yes, definitely. And then I think the last thing we'll probably touch on at this is, um, if you are at a job that is a little bit challenging, best ways to kind of make it through a little challenging job that you may have to hold on to for a while. Maybe it's the people. Maybe you just don't like what you're doing. Maybe I don't know. It's like factory work and you're tired. If I had to name my worst job was Amazon. I worked in the warehouse, and like in my early 20s, just to like summertime money or something. But it was terrible. It was like 10 to 12-hour days. We were on our feet. There's a production goal that quota you have to make, and people are coming around talking about you ain't make the it is I would never advise anybody to do that. I guess unless you have to. But anyway, oh yes, if you have a job like that and you're just trying to like make it through.
I have a friend who also worked at Amazon, and I don't know, she didn't last 3 months. She said it was so stressful that
Yes.
you're on a clock and they're watching you, there are cameras over you
Mhm.
constantly, but that's a hard position to be in. But again, she had a job and she had insurance, and then that led to another job at a different company, and so, it was stressful, but she made it through it. But what I would say is when you're in that situation, if you're in a miserable job, do that 9 to 5, put in those hours, get there at 9, leave at 5, 5:01. Don't stay late, don't give extra, because if that company doesn't respect you, you need to just put in the hours that you're intended to do, focus on the job that you're expected to do, but while you're doing that, go home in the evenings and get your resume ready to start applying for other roles, because that gives you, number 1, motivation to make a change, because only you can do that. If you're miserable in a job, why are you staying there? I'm not gonna tell you how old I am, but I've been around for a long time, and what I've come to learn is I'm not gonna stay where it's miserable. I'm just not. I may have to take a pay cut, and trust me, in my careers, I've gone from 160 to 50, went up to 140, and now as a teacher, trust me, I'm not making anything close to that. So, what I'm telling you is at my age, you realize money is not everything, though you do have to pay the bill. But if you're miserable, don't stay stuck. Redefine your resume, reintroduce yourself, and go find something else, even if you have to take a slight pay cut, because that will lead to something better for you. You'll be happier. You'll just be happier.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Is there any affirmations or anything that you tell yourself when you're like going through a situation like that? Any kind of little tips when you talk to yourself?
Well, I always tell myself, I'm gonna be the bigger person, especially in a work situation. If somebody's giving me hell, I always smile and give them that whole, kill them with kindness thing, because there's something to that. People who are miserable try to make you miserable, but if you show that you're still happy, you're gonna be you, that that just ticks them off even more so. So, not to mind game them, but to show that you're not gonna best me by trying to put me
Mhm.
down, because I'm me and you can't control the thoughts in my head. When I was younger in my 20s, I'm not gonna lie. I'd be at work, and the GM would go into the news director's office, and you're young and you have ego, and it's like, "Oh my god, where did I
Yeah.
stand?" me. They're talking about me. What are they saying? I'm telling you, 9.5 times out of 10, they are not even thinking about you. You know, they've got bigger fish to fry type deal. But don't let things get in your head. Don't let them fester at work, and just be bigger than that person that's making things miserable. You know, life is too short to worry about the small shit. Can I say that word? Oh.
Yes, well said too. That is perfect to wrap that up. Okay. And then let's jump into our rapid fire. So, if you have some family and friends visiting Dallas, where are you taking them restaurant wise?
Well, okay, we gotta take them to the stockyards and walk around there, but, the restaurants, they're Cattlemen's because it's a steakhouse, and we're closer to Fort Worth than Dallas, so I'm gonna give you the Tarrant County hot spot, but, Cattlemen's, I think everybody loves Pappasitos, you just can't go wrong when you want that Tex-Mex vibe. There's this teeny tiny restaurant here in town in Godley where we live, and it's called Del Norte. They have some really good Mexican food and beef and whatnot. I'm on a Mexican food theme, aren't I?
Yeah.
Would be, all of the museums in the stockyards in the downtown Fort Worth area are fantastic. They're really, really good, very nice, for this area. And then another restaurant might be golly, we eat a lot of Mexican food and steaks. Downtown, really anything downtown Fort Worth is good. What's that place? Let's see, there's a pub there. I don't even remember the name. All I'm saying is Fort Worth is a fun place. Sundance Square is a great place to go just because it's
Sundance
the
Square.
other side of yeah, Sundance Square in Fort Worth. It's the other half, the Metroplex across from Dallas. So
Okay. Favorite thing about the DFW area?
I am gonna say the people. I'm not kidding you. When I've lived here all my life. I was born in Houston, so I'm a Texan through and through, but people have moved here from other states and everybody says there's nothing like the friendliness of people in Texas. And I have found that to be true. I think Dallas is great, but on the DFW, as a whole in Fort Worth and this side of town, you'll find gentlemen opening doors and tipping hats. And it's a very, very friendly place to be. And I love it. I love being here in DFW. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay. And so I think you kind of said it with this one, but I was going to ask like, what is, um, what is like some kind of like common misconception people have about the DFW area? And I feel like you kind of mentioned a little bit, but
Well, Dallas is beauty, and at Fort Worth, everybody spits and platoons and they wear cowboy hats. Fort Worth is money. There's a lot of oil and there's a lot of money in Fort Worth. And so the misconception is that everybody rides horses and they all live on farms. And that's not the case. I mean, it's a very friendly sophistication, I think, in DFW. And it's a little more laid back than I think people imagine as far as Dallas. Cause yeah, there are some pockets of Dallas where people are their noses are in the air, but I haven't found that to be the case in the circles that I run around. You know what I mean? I have found
yeah,
everybody really nice. So Dallas is not as snooty as people would like to believe, and Fort Worth is not as hick country, as to believe either.
and that is perfect. I think we're gonna leave it right there.
Oh, and make sure you make the Studio 80 too sometime.
Yes, we got it. Yes, yes. Studio 80. I recommend as
Like
well.
down Fort Worth. We hear it's a lot of fun, right, Tila?
We do
Yeah.
hear that. Yeah, people tell me that. I don't know for sure, but for sure. That is great. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Alice. I appreciate your words of wisdom.
I love you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.